Let's see, FS7, 4K camera, obviously, super 35mm sensor, has a global shutter instead of a rolling shutter, which is the big advantage of this gigantic body. Kit comes with a V-mount plate, which we don't have on here right now. Joey, you want to get the V-mount plate out for me?
Yes, sir.
Base ISO is 2000, as I recall. And there's no dual native ISO. This is a little too old for that. Sony E-mount, and it has built-in ND. Obviously, most of you guys know this, but this is so that somebody that hasn't touched it knows what I'm talking about. Thanks, Joey. I have to go that far. That's good. Let me see what else to shoot. What else should I talk about here? Oh yes, frames per second. This can go up to 180 in 1080. You can get up to 120 in 4K, or is it 60?
I think it was 60.
I believe it's 60. And like I said, you want to shoot A7sii on this camera. That's the best codec it can shoot. It's about 600 megabytes per second, as I recall, which is a pretty robust codec for being 10-bit 422. Let me find DC here. No, that's the headphone jack. Is up here? Yeah, there we go. Cool. Thank you, sir. Like I mentioned, you can power this via a V-mount instead of the built-in battery. So what I like to do is, yeah, if you want to show a closer up view, I like to put the base battery in there so that I have something to switch from to the next V-mount that I use. That way, all I have to do is pop this off, pop the new one on. It's called a hot swap. Let's see, what else should we mention here? Man, I'm jumping around here. Let's go to ND filters. This is how you change your ND. We've got quarter, let's see, 1/64, 1/16, and 1/4 ND. I can't translate that exactly to stops of light for you, but I believe that's 0.3, 0.6, and, or no, 0.3, 0.9, and 1.2, but don't quote me on that. Here's our EVF connection, which is your viewfinder, electronic viewfinder. There's a mirror option up here. And you can flip this, so if you need to look at it for some reason in the opposite direction, you can. You can also change your contrast by changing this wheel. So if you need more contrast in the day, you can turn your peaking and your zebra on from here. And then we'll get down to the actual buttons and settings on the camera itself. This is our audio right here. These are your pot knobs, if you will, that can change your audio settings. You're gonna get some horrible feedback, so I'm not gonna turn them up. Coming from the TV.
Okay.
You have manual and auto gain control. I don't ever recommend using auto. Like I said, it's channel 1 and 2, which corresponds to the other side of the camera, where we have input 1 and input 2. And we have our line and mic, and then phantom power options. And let's see, this does have HDMI and SDI out. Some of our cameras don't have both options. Obviously, the more professional one is SDI because you can lock it in. I don't have SDI in here, so I'll show you that on another camera. Right now, we're just plugged into the HDMI slot. Can you mind grabbing the handle for me that goes with the FS7?
Oh, goodness, man, we just need everything.
Well, this is a particular thing that I think has not been noted that's in the kit. So I'm going to show it.
No, this thing, right?
Yes.
It is this thing.
That's crazy. Well, this camera comes with a handle, so you can do shoulder rig pretty easily. I'm going to plug this in right here. There. I just plugged the remote into the camera so I can use the actual controls on the handle.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna put the rosette mount on the camera.
Yes, Donnie, this is being recorded.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll see in a bit.
Okay.
So if you need to go shoulder mount, you can use this as a gripping point, but it can also control your zoom. If you're on the zoom lens that comes with this kit, there's a record button. You can flip through the menus, all of that. So it's in the kit. Know it's there if you want to use it. I think that's it for the actual camera itself. So let's dive into the menu. So if you want to turn your camera off for a minute. Can everybody see the TV on Zoom? Can you see the TV?
You can check it.
Yes.
Okay. Is it pretty clear or should I move it closer?
You could push into it.
Cool.
Oh, my head's in the way.
Is that better or should I zoom the camera as well?
That's better.
Okay, cool.
That's good.
This is what the menu looks like. We're going to use our scroll wheel and our back and forward button on the camera itself to go through it. I'll start from the top down. We've got our user settings. This is where your base settings are the most important one in here, where you have custom or Cine or EI. Cine EI uses exposure index instead of ISO. That's the more popular one for most shoots. Custom is where you can set basically everything from scratch. In Cine EI, you also have to pick between exposure index and your white balance at the same time. I'll show you what I mean. So we switch over here. So let's see, where does white balance? There we go. Oh, actually, okay. My apologies, it is working independently. Sometimes when you use IE mode, it will change based on your exposure index, which is what I'm using right now. So we have our base of 2000, 3200, and then 6400. And then we have a couple of presets. We have outdoor, fluorescent, and tungsten. All those color temperatures. Let's go back in the menu. We have color space here. And that is an important thing to note because we can choose S-gamma S-log2, S-gamma 3.cine, S-log3, and then S-gamma 3 S-log3, which all of those are different flavors, but this is the one that most people choose. This is the flattest color profile you can get on the camera itself. You get the most latitude at post. Something I don't think I put on there is stops of dynamic range on that sheet, did I? I'll add that.
Yeah.
Because I can't quote exactly how many stops you get with this.
Yeah.
Image scan, I don't think I've ever actually messed with that. So I leave that on normal. Record format is another important one. Obviously, we're in UHD 2398 right now, which is pretty standard. You could choose to go all the way up to DCI 4K in 60 frames a second, 5994p. And we can go all the way down to 1920 by 1080 in 23p. Now, I mentioned that this goes to 180, but in order to do that, you have to go to S&Q mode and change your frame rate to 180. But because we're in 4K right now, the maximum we can go is 60. So let me go change our base function, or our shooting method, sorry. To 1080. It's going to switch over here. Oh, wow. Okay. Cool. Go back and go back to S&Q. Did I? Oh, I wonder how that happened. Thank you. Oh, that's why. That's another thing to mention. So because I switched to 1920 by 1080, the camera is not showing up on the viewfinder right now. That's an important setting. So I'm gonna go switch that right now. Sorry, guys. No. There we go. All right, now we're back in business. So that's an important note. If you're on set and you're not getting any signal out of your monitor, that's usually because you didn't change the setting that I just showed you, which is in video output format. And you can choose between all these different options. But if you're running two monitors out of this and using two different signals, the only way you're going to be able to do it is to actually record out of the camera at 1920 by 1080, which is kind of a bummer. So you're going to have to use one output and then piggyback from that output if you want another monitor of any kind. Anyway, we're going to go back here and go back up to base functions. Here's our codecs, A7sii. You can also choose A7sii or MPEG HD 422. There's a whole bunch of grayed out ones here. The FS7 is technically capable of raw video, but it has to have a very expensive backpack to it that records the raw format. So you can't use it with our current setup. We could buy the backpacks, but there's cheaper cameras that can do better raw these days. So, but I like to mention it because I get asked a lot. A7sii, you have the sheet?
Yeah.
Can you quote what the bit rate is for that? Something like 240 frames, megabytes per second? It's pretty low, or did I just put 8 bits?
150.
150, okay. So that's the difference. A7sii is 600 megabytes per second. A7sii, 150, and you're losing 10-bit 422. You're shooting an 8-bit now. So don't ever shoot your film on A7sii. You'll probably get some kind of feedback on that. MPEG HD, I won't touch that. That's an MP4. You don't want to use that. So if you're in that mode and you wonder why your footage looks crunchy as all heck, that's why. S&Q mode. I kind of skipped over it, but basic answer to this is how you gain higher frame rates, especially in 1080. Right now, you can change it to full scan. And you can see I can go up now to 180 frames per second, but it has to be 1080. We do have another camera that can go up to 240 that I'll get to, but you're also cropping in on that one. I believe this is a full 35 millimeter sensor at 180, which is pretty good. All right, let's back out of here. Picture cache, I haven't messed with that, but it's there. Simulate record, I believe that's involving the record button. Output format, I mentioned this. I won't go over it again, just know it's there. Monitor LUT, this is an important one. So right now, our TV, I believe, is showing pretty flat. Am I right? Can you guys see that? Look pretty flat? Okay, let me flip it over. What you can do is tell the camera, hey, I want to put a LUT on my HDMI output. Oh, interesting. Not letting me do that right now. Let's do profile. Okay. Interesting. Skipping over HDMI, that's really interesting. Anyway, I won't go into detail about how to change it since it's being stupid, but you can change that to a custom LUT that you build and put in this camera for your film. Most people like to do that via Shogun though, and just use it on the Shogun itself. But there is a way to do it directly into the camera as well. That way, when your director's looking at the monitor and doesn't know anything about flat color, he can be like, why is it flat? You can flip it. Oh, sorry, There you go. This is what it's gonna look like. It's also important to note that when you're shooting flat, any log format, you need to make sure that you can monitor it out of a monitor itself, not this little 3-inch. If you use this little 3-inch as your only basis, you're gonna get terrible footage. And specifically this camera, S-Log3, 2 stops overexposed is what's gonna get you the norm. Don't shoot for exposure. You need to give the light, the extra light on the sensor for this guy. Otherwise your blacks will look crunchy as heck and you will not like it, I promise. It's happened to me. And as you can see, there's a whole bunch of other categories that we can pick in here. So let's go to LUT. And I can change this to a whole bunch of built-in ones like Rec 709, 800%. Let me see if that will let us change. Okay, so let's change HDMI. This is an S-Log3 codec, or excuse me, LUT. And you can pick from the list. And I know that when you do user, you can load in a LUT to the camera itself. Clip. You can name your clips. You can call this camera A. You can tell it it's reel 001. And you can tell it what position you're in. So if you need to do that much metadata, you can. And most people on a professional set are going to do that. There are ways to do that in post, or you can put it on your slate. But this is the professional way to do the metadata on the clip so that the editor knows, okay, this is from ACAM on this day and this roll. And that can be important. Viewfinder settings, so we can change our brightness and we can actually change this to black and white. Now, why would you want to change it to black and white? Does anybody know? Any guesses? Black and white is a perfect example of how to measure contrast specifically without color. So I could tell if my background is the way I want it to be, or if my subject's face has enough fall up on it. And then I can switch back over. A lot of DPs like to do this, to use black and white and then view the color later. But I've also seen some that don't like it. So. Let's change that back to color.
You guys froze up.
Oh, dang. Is it frozen on Zoom?
Let me check on my meeting.
Can you see this now?
Oh yeah, we froze.
Bummer. What are you doing for
Okay.
these?
We're back, right?
Okay.
Can you see us?
Yes, you're good.
We're back. Everything's good.
Good.
Yeah, I guess the Wi-Fi.
Is everybody back?
Is it still? Okay, it's still recording.
Still recording?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. I'll have to
Oh,
link
Lordy.
these in post. All right. We'll continue where we left off. Chris, did you get the viewfinder and the black and white, or did it freeze before that?
At the end of your black and white is where it stopped.
Okay, I just switched it back to color. So, assignable buttons. There are programmable buttons on the camera itself. I can show you those in a minute. That say 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can assign all of those a custom setting if you want, and reassign them from what they're actually labeled on the camera. I choose to leave them labeled what the camera says just for ease of use. Assignable dial. Again, there's a dial on here that can be changed what function it serves. It can do ISO, it can do focus, it can do audio. Most people choose to keep it as iris. And then there's a dedicated iris dial. Remember that. Okay. We'll get out of that function and go back. Format media. this is where I'm gonna mention what we're gonna start doing in the cage. When we get this camera back, we're gonna format that card the minute it comes back. So if you guys need to dump footage, do it before you come to the cage. If you have a last minute, oh crap moment, I'll let you go dump it. But know that once it's in the cage, there's no recovering files 6 months later, 3 months later. Oh, maybe it's still on the camera. No, it's not gonna be on the camera. It's too much of a hassle for us, and frankly, we don't wanna show off your projects to other people. It's just downright unprofessional. And you're gonna see this at every rental house. If you rent media from them, they're gonna format it before they give it to you, format it again when they get it back. So I'm just gonna go ahead and quickly format both of these. We're gonna do the exact same thing with the camera itself. We're gonna set it back to the initialized features. So I'll show you what that looks like, because this camera is very different once you do that. It goes into DB mode. It goes to, so instead of ISO, you have DB, like it's a camcorder, which could be really interesting. And there's a whole bunch of presets you have to set back to where you want it to. Part of the reason we're doing that is so that you guys get the camera the way it was out of the box, rather than somebody tweaking 5 million settings and you're trying to reset all of them. That way it makes it easier on whoever's DP that day. I'm sure that Ariana can relate to that. And then of course there's edit user menu, which we're not gonna mess with. Let's go to camera now. We got our ISO settings. We're at 2000 right now. You can set your, and right now we're in exposure index. So you'll notice that ISO itself is orange, which means I can't touch it. But I can change my exposure index to whatever value I needed to. Most people I know will set one of them to 2000, one of them to 3200, and then this one I wouldn't go all the way to 6400. I go to like 5000. And you can go lower than 2000, but your best noise to signal to noise ratio is going to be 2000. So let's back out of that. Focus. Obviously, you can use auto zoom, auto focus on the camera if you wanted to. Nobody here is going to do that, right? Right? Right, Chris? Okay. So you can change the settings if you're doing a dock, it's helpful, but for most of what we do, it's not helpful. Here's the shutter tab, and I'm sure that some of you guys know that you can change between shutter speed and shutter angle. Speed is a simpler way to understand it using fractions, but most people in the industry stick with angle because this will stay the same and adjust for you based on what frame rate you're shooting. So right now, because I'm in, I think I was still in 180 frames per second. So this is actually not accurate, but it would be a lot higher than that. So I'll change it to speed and see. If I was shooting 180 frames per second, I would need to have a 360 shutter angle. So the closest I'm going to get is 288 or 100, 1/400. Anyway, change that back to angle. And we'll exit out of there. Color bars. I don't actually use color bars, but it's there if you wanted to. You can, that's for broadcast use mostly, so that they can get a slate and see if their picture is accurate coming from the camera. Noise suppression. Does anybody actually use noise suppression in the camera?
No.
Okay, good. I would not use any built-in noise suppression from any of the cameras we have in the cage. It's not going to be good. Do it in post. It's the one time you'll hear me say it, do it in post.
Don't record. Don't record from the camera.
Flicker reduction. This is important. I'm sure you guys know that we're on 60 hertz circuit here. Anywhere else in the world, you'd be on 50 hertz. So if you have a bulb that's flickering, check this, make sure it's not in 50 hertz, because you might get a nasty flicker. You can also change your shutter speed to accommodate for that if it's really bad. And I have seen some bulbs that are really bad. So let's see. Steady shot is off right now. Handle zoom. So this is for the built-in zoom. I don't use the built-in zoom a ton, but you can change your speed over here on the right. You can increase this or decrease this based on how much you want it to be reactive to your forward and backward zoom. Black balance. Has anybody actually black balanced a camera before? It's the exact same thing as white balance, but it's just as important. And a lot of people don't do it until post-production. That's when it's most common to do it, is do it in Resolve. Everybody balances their whites, but not necessarily their blacks, which means you can get a blue, a green, an orange tint in your blacks unless you balance it. Same idea with the vector scope or the RGB parade where you change that. I'll try to show that at some point. Micro adjustment. Oh, that's autofocus. We're going to skip that. Video light set. So this is for the light that's on the camera itself that tells you when you're recording. It's a little red light that will show up on the front. Can be helpful, but sometimes that can also reflect into your shot, so you can shut it off here. Let's go down. Now we're in the paint menu, which is what Sony calls their white balance. I'm going to go change our base settings here so we can see some of that. Go back to paint. Oh. There we go. So this is where you would set all your presets. You can change your A color temp and your B color temp, but right now it's not letting me. And you can also change auto white balance speed, which is another function I don't ever expect you guys to use, because auto white balance, unless you're in a very specific weird environment, it's not going to be helpful. Setting Kelvin temperature is always going to be better. You can manually change your blacks. I don't recommend it. You can also change your gamma, which has a lot to do with your contrast and what gamma curve you're using. As you can see, these are all grayed out right now, so we're not going to mess with them. But again, gamma knee is another way to change your curve to help for compensating for things. White clip, that'll tell you when you are clipping. If you're above 100%, how much you're clipping, so that you know to bring the camera, reduce your exposure. Detail, this is also sharpening in the camera, which I don't recommend at all. The lenses are going to give you as sharp as they're going to give you. Had no idea you could change skin detail. Aperture, that could be exposure compensation, but again, on a automatic lens like our Sigmas or our Canon lenses, that's where you're going to see that, where you're actually changing your iris with the thumb wheel instead of a actual iris wheel, or what's the right word for it? Not wheel. Gear. We'll go with that for now. We're not going to mess with matrix. I don't suggest touching maintenance. Audio. Here's our inputs. We can change this from internal to input 1, or we can choose the shoe mount, which is on top here. And then you can change your signal gain for each of those independently based on how much gain you want to give it, so that you don't pull it out of the microphone. There's a wind filter on there. You can turn that on if you want. It's not necessary. And as you can see, we technically have 4 channels of input, but there's only 2 XLR inputs, which are the most important. You can also use built-in audio if you choose to, as scratch audio. But if you're doing a run and gun shoot, you can plug an XLR into this and run with that. So I'm going to back out of here. And here's your audio output. So if you need to hear audio from the camera, so let's say the director wants to hear it and he's 50 feet away, You might need to tweak a few settings in here so that you have scratch audio for them to be able to hear if you're doing a wireless video out and your director wants to hear. That's the easiest way to fix it. Your sound guy should also be doing that, right, Joe? All right, video. So this is where you control all of your output functions. So for example, is your SDI outputting? Is your HDMI outputting? And then what format is it in? Is it in 1080? Is it in 4K? Kind of went over some of that. Output settings, this is important. You turn this up to recorder, you can't see the menus anymore on your monitor, which is actually the way you probably should be viewing it. But if you want to be seeing the exposure, like let's say your gaffer wants to see it, you're gonna need to change this to monitor. And there we go. Letterbox, I think most people know what a letterbox is, but basically that's a frame guide if you're shooting in an anamorphic frame or anything other than 16:9. So if you're trying to shoot 4:3, it's a letterbox. That's just another term for frame guides. Go ahead and back out. Output display, again, that's controlling which outputs are currently functioning right now. All right, let's move on to viewfinder. Here's our settings for that. Like I mentioned, you can change the brightness and the color. Peaking is an important thing for focus assistance. Now you can change this. I'm not sure exactly how low you can go. You can go pretty darn low. So if you wanted this at half strength, you could, but most people either choose to use 70 for skin tones, or they'll boost it up to somewhere around 90, 95 so that they know that they're clipping, so they could bring it back down. You can also change the color, which we have black and white, which will actually change the monitor into black and white mode, or you can choose red, yellow, or blue. And then you could change the peaking level. Oh, I believe that's the lowest it'll pick up. Let's go back out. Zebras, I'm sure you guys know this, but again, it's another way to control your exposure. You could set that at 70 and be able to tell if your skin tones are properly exposed. You can also use it for clipping. Some people use them, some people don't. Marker. So this is where you can change. You can put a safety zone. I don't ever use that, but this is where you can change your frame guides. So as you can see, now we have a frame guide on there for, not sure exactly what it's set to, but my guess is it's somewhere in the 235. Here we go. So your director wants to shoot a sci-fi and they want it to be shot like it's anamorphic lenses on spherical lenses. This is how you do it. And then in post, you crop it again with frame guides. It's easy to make in Photoshop. And as you can see, I have a couple other options here. I have 4:3, just like in the old school television days. 1:66:1, I don't know exactly which one that is. 1:8:5:1 is a popular one for some broadcast or streaming. And then of course 2:3:5 is anamorphic or cinemascope. And so is 2:4:1. It just matters how thin you want it to be. So let's go back out. Then you can change the height and width of your box, position, and whatnot. We'll go to display options now. As you can see, I can choose to display any or all of these settings on my monitor itself, which I'll show you what we have open right now. We have a lot of settings on right now. But if I wanted to check my shot and not turn them off permanently, I can press the display button here and check, see what I think. Now, I still have it set to 4:3. I'm gonna go change that because nobody wants to shoot in 4:3 unless they're choosing to do that. Off, there we go. Video signal. This is where you can change from waveform, vector scope, or histogram. Vector scope is important for color. to see if you're going past broadcast safe. If you go past broadcast safe and you are going to broadcast this on TV, they'll make you fix it. I've had it happen to me before. Waveform, of course, is the most popular way to measure exposure. It's down here in our right-hand corner. As you can see right now, we're pretty low, actually. I could go up quite a bit. Even that I would call underexposed for this camera. Let me
It's like
pull that into
glaring.
focus again. Thanks for fixing that. Let's go back in here. Time code. That's something I hope to teach someday because it is important when you're starting to work with a professional sound mixer and he's got a tentacle sync set up. You can jam time code into the camera from the mixer, and what that does is it matches it up in post so that it's exactly where it needs to be and there's no processing needed in the editing software. More to come on that, but this lets you choose how you display your time code and if it's coming out of the HDMI or if it's coming out of an SDI. Usually it's going to be a BNC connection or a 3.5 millimeter connection. Correct, Joey? Cool. Then we're into S&Q. This is our recording settings. We already did S&Q. Interval recording. Anybody shoot time lapse?
Mhm.
You can shoot internal time lapse with this. It's pretty decent. You can change your interval to whatever you need it to be, all the way down to, oh my, 24 hours. If you're shooting a glacier, you can use this camera. But I hope you're not doing that. So we're going to bring it back up to somewhere in the minute range. And number of frames. You can also tell it to shoot a burst of frames at that point. So if you're trying to do that, that's fine. Another way to tackle something that takes forever, but you need a couple of frames and then a couple more. There's a picture cache in here. I have not actually messed with that. We already did that. And there's your HDMI and SDI record control. That's the button on the camera being controlling whatever monitor's up here that's connected via HDMI or SDI. So you can still press record on your camera and still get a recording on the monitor. Okay, then we're into media, which I covered.
Hey, Ben, real quick. So are we going until noon?
That was the plan.
Okay.
So I'll probably jump into
Yeah.
EVA1 from here.
Okay.
And if you want to do a different camera, I'll probably,
Okay.
I will go much faster on the next couple of
Okay.
cameras. This is just so people understand where I'm coming from.
Okay. I just
But
wanna
thank
make
you
sure
for the
we're
heads
good
up.
for all- Yeah, it's 11.
This is where you're going to change a lot of your metadata, like your monitor LUT, your lens file. I don't actually mess with that. And then the last one is your system settings, which is where you get your base settings and your codec, your record format, gen lock, which has to do with time code, and then assignable buttons. Most of these are not important or crucial to shooting. So I'm not going to cover these, but just so you know they're there. APR is important though. If you get this signal, put the lens cap over the lens and let it do its thing. That's calibrating the sensor so that it doesn't get noise. Like as you can see right now, I don't know if you can tell, but on my LCD, I can tell right in this area that there's a bit of a white spill, if you will, and that's how APR fixes it. I'm going to back out of that. And then of course there's version, which will tell you if we're at the current firmware that we need to be at. But that's it for the FS7. Does anybody have any questions? Did I cover most of it? Cool. Let's move on so we can keep going here.
Yeah, gotcha.
Panasonic EVA1 Super 35 millimeter sensor, just like the FS7, a little newer. And this has dual native ISO in it. So it has 800 and 2500 are its dual native ISO settings. We'll dive into that in a minute. Same build a lot compared to the FS7, but there are a few quirks that are different. And if you'll notice, we have the Sigma 18 to 35 on here, which is our new kits. We have 18 to 35 and a 50 to 100. I have a handle here, just like the other camera, and it does have a connection so that I can use remote recording and other settings. You can also rotate these handles to fit your needs. While we're over here, I'll talk about the audio inputs. Once again, we have 2 inputs, but you'll notice there's no control on here like the FS7. That's controlled from the other side of the camera. Here's our SDI. There's only one SDI port on here. The other one is time code. So don't try to plug an SDI into time code.
Audio.
Here's audio. Again, we have some pot knobs. We have manual and auto. But as far as the rest of that goes, it's going to be in the settings in the camera. Yes, top one is SDI.
Oh, the top one.
Bottom one is BNC.
Oh, okay.
It's labeled on the camera.
Oh, yeah, it's too dark.
And this is our 12 volt connection.
So yeah, that connects to the VMaster.
And this, yep.
So every kit but one has these, the wooden camera plate.
Yes, so Hans, if you're watching this, I apologize. Kit number 6 of the FS7 does not have it. So we'll fix that someday. Similar setup, but a little bit different buttons. You have ND filters on this, but unlike the FS7, it's electronic. It's not command controlled, so it's automatic. This does mean that you could get stuck with an ND filter halfway open by accident. You might have to cycle through them. Let me know if one of them is not working at all, because that's something I'd have to actually send out to get fixed. Unlike the FS7, our little clip or our little toggle switch does have all these built-in features. You just have to change which one it is, and then you use this wheel to change what you're changing. So for example, I'm on ISO right now. I could switch to the user preset, which I think most people change that to white balance. No, white balance is above that. And I can change my white balance here. Again, you have an A, B, and then I believe you have the standard 3200, 4300, 56, and 6300. And then there's a green magenta shift attached to some of those, which we're not going to mess with. But, and this is your iris control. If you want to show them what's on the monitor right now. I'm going to change my iris electronically because this is the Sigma lens. And I'm doing that with the iris wheel. Now, if you see this camera, and it's like this, you hear that little sound, and you see this little A, that's auto. You don't want that.
Yeah, you're kidding.
You don't want that. If you press in, that turns auto on or off. So make sure it's off. Let's see, what else should we mention? This does run on SD cards. The FS7 runs on QXD cards, but these are not cheap SD cards. These are V90 cards, which are why you can achieve the codecs that are in this camera. This can record up to 400 megabytes a second on this SD card. These are expensive. Don't get them mixed up with your own cards, please. I've already had to replace a lot of them. That's my rant. This does have a built-in battery as well. It's a Panasonic version of what the FS7 has. Again, same idea. If I take the V mount off, it stays powered. We have our thumbnail button that did not show off the other camera, but it's in a similar location. It's underneath the car door, I believe. That will show us what clips we have on the camera at the moment, which does look like this one has clips on. So we're going to format that eventually. Let's dive into the menus.
I'm gonna.
And we can change the camera here.
Yeah, I got it. Just go ahead. Oh, yeah, I got it. Got it.
Thanks.
Mhm.
And it looks like our menus are showing up on there. I didn't even do anything. I guess. I didn't know it was. I'm really glad it is. Cool. Good. All right. Let's start with thumbnail. That's our playback. And you can choose which slot you're looking at. And if you want it to resume playback, and then under clip, you can choose to protect clips in here, which is interesting. So if you shoot shots and you want to make sure you can't delete them, there's an option for that in here. And then of course there's information about each clip, which is all your metadata. We're going to go back out. Oh, it's because I'm in playback mode. Hold on. Go back out. There we go. System settings. Oh, that's why it was showing, because we were in thumbnail mode. It's not showing now. So bear with me. I need to pull that up for you guys so you can see the menu. Ariana, have you ever had to do that with this camera?
What are you trying to do?
Show the menus?
It was done.
I don't usually have to do a big monitor like that. We just use a blue shot.
Right.
I would imagine it'd be somewhere else like this last time, but
Yeah, it was just.
Right, but the
output.
menus are very different.
right.
So. Oh, here we go. Output settings. Here we go. Menu display. Cool. All right, now we're in business. So this is the main menu. You're going to get system, camera, record settings. We're going to go into system settings. System mode is the same equivalent to base settings on the FS7. You can change your frame rate. You can also choose to do SDI out. If you choose 5.7K and you pick the correct Shogun, you can record 5.7K ProRes RAW out of this camera at a 444 color sample. I believe it's 12-bit, so it's a pretty good signal. Well, basically everyone except the Ninjas. So there's the Ninja itself, the V, but there's also the Ninja Inferno, which only has HDMI out. And the only way to get that signal is through SDI on this camera. So you can't use HDMI. I'm going to turn that off for right now, but you can also choose to crop into 4K or to 2K, which is a way to get a higher frame rate if you need to. But it will record at 4K or 2K if you're cropping in like that. You can also change your sensor mode. Panasonic likes to let you do everything you can possibly do with the camera. So we can choose to have 5.7K, we can go down to 2.8K, which I believe lets you get higher frame rates. And you can go all the way down to micro four thirds crop. Now, that's a pretty significant crop, but you can get up to 240 frames per second at that crop. So if you can adjust for it, it's awesome. I'll back out of here. Main pixel, again, we're in 1920 by 1080 right now. I'll change that to 4K. Now, this is an important one. Your codecs in here are in two different flavors. And right now, based on the settings I'm on, I'm only allowed to choose long GUP. Oh, here we go. I can choose all I. So the difference between long GUP and all I is the same as on the FS7 when you're choosing XAVCI or XAVCL. XAVCL is a long GUP codec. It's why it's a worse bit rate. It's why it's a worse color sample rate. All I is XAVCI. And that's a much better rate. That's where you get your 10-bit That's where you get 422. It's 400 megabytes a second in this camera, which is a little lower than the FS7, but it's still comparable. So what I'm telling you is long GOP is the equivalent of an H.264 file or an MP4. It's the stuff that you see on YouTube that's got banding problems, it's got color shifts, all kinds of problems. So don't use it. Stick with 422 all-I 400 megabytes. Now you'll notice there's a whole bunch of ABC HD options. Again, that's going to be 8-bit 422 or 420. It's not something you want to pick if you can avoid it. But if you're recording proxies, that's a good option. So, all right, let me go back out. And, okay, that covers that. And then color settings. This is where you can change your lookup table and whether or not you're seeing vlog or if you're seeing a LUT. And you can pick which one is showing what, whether it be your LCD or your outputs or your main. Your main is what you're actually recording to the clip. Everything else is just what you're choosing to show. So it won't necessarily record that. But if you change your main from vlog and you're expecting vlog, you're not going to get it. So make sure that that's set right. User switches, again, custom buttons. They're all labeled on here. You can change them if you wish. Side lock. Interesting. So you can choose to lock any of these settings if you need to. Again, you can have the tally light on. You can choose to have it make a sound. You can turn the fan off manually. I've never had a fan issue with this camera, but if you're in a hot environment and you're worried about it during the take, you can do that. LCD, again, we can change brightness, contrast, whether it's backlit, all of that. Clock, that's pretty obvious. Information, again, I don't usually mess with this, but that'll tell you what firmware you're on and what modes you're in. There's language, we speak English. If you want to change it, you can, but I'll be mad because I'll have to mess with it. Initialize, that's where we're gonna go for our factory reload, which is what I talked about. And that will set everything back to the very beginning. So I'm gonna emphasize every single time you check a camera out, have a day before you shoot. So pick up your gear the day before, check it over, make sure it's good, then go to set. Don't expect this to run out of the box. Because if you do, you're gonna find settings that you didn't want the minute you get on set, and then you're losing time, and that means money. So that's important. All right, let me see if I missed anything. I don't think I did. Camera settings. This is where we're gonna change our frame rate, which as you can see, it's set to 30 right now. You change that. You can undercrank on this camera up to 2 frames per second. Does anybody know what undercranking is? That's what it is. It's basically Charlie Chaplin style. Ooh, hello. Wow, that just started. Oh, okay. Guess we don't get sound at 30 frames per second. Interesting. You can choose to add a frame rate or change a setting in there if you want. Then we have our shutter speed panel. Again, you can change it from degree to seconds. So degree is shutter angle, seconds is shutter speed. You can change your value here, which looks like it's not set correct at all. There's 180. And then you can choose another one to just flip through. So basically you can customize this as much as you want. So you can just click on a different one. This does have, okay, so this calls it IE, which is exposure index, instead of ISO, but it's the exact same idea. But because this is a dual native ISO, there's a couple different modes here. There's native ISO only, which means you can only flip between 800 and 2500, which are the base ISOs. Or you can choose, okay, I want to use 800. Now, if you do that, I don't think you guys can see my actual display, if you do that and you choose 800, here, I'll just change it to ISO so you can see the difference. You can go below 800, you can go all the way down to 200. And it goes up in steps incrementally all the way up to 2000. But if you'll notice, you can't go any higher than that in 800 mode. In order to go higher than that, you're gonna have to go back in here and change this to 2500 base. That will start at 2500 and go up from there, up to 25,600. I don't recommend shooting that high, but I would imagine it's pretty clean all the way up to 64, 8,000 or so. Kind of like the FS7. I'm gonna go ahead and change it back to native. Oh, and as you can see, you can change it to dBs. Most people choose ISO. And then we're gonna go into our white balance. So again, you can change which value you're changing. So you have a whole bunch of presets in here. 6300 is pretty cloudy. That's daylight, fluorescent, and then tungsten. And then you have custom memory ones that you can set. So if you go into a very specific lighting room and you want to go into another room in the same shot, you can flip between them. Noise reduction, I don't plan on using it. I hope you guys don't either, but it's there if you really wanted to do that. Lens settings. Okay, so as you can see, it's labeling it as a 50 right now. We're not on a 50. We're on a 18 to 35 and we're at an 18 right now. So this is another AC job that you can change all this info. As you can see, it says right open, and you can choose to flip it to left. I don't know why you would, but if you're using a particular lens that needs that. IR shooting, never actually used this, but that stands for infrared light, which means you could use this as an infrared camera if you needed to. I've never done that, but, and then there's EIS, which is electronic image stabilization. It's not the actual sensor floating. It's just the camera cropping in a little bit and trying to accommodate for some of it. I've not tested it personally, but what I have heard is that it's okay. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to look like a gimbal. So be aware of that when you're using it. You do have to tell it what lens you're on for that as well to help it compensate. And then there's black balance, like I mentioned earlier. We'll back out of this. Record settings. Here's our cards where we format our media, which I'm going to go ahead and do on this one. So I saw some media in there. And then we'll go to clip name. As I mentioned before, change camera and reel number. You can also choose to relay record or simultaneously record. That's what it was in the other camera. Simultaneous recording. That's what I was looking for. So you can choose to record to both cards at different compression rates if you wanted to. So you have an automatic backup if you want. But these are only 64 gig cards, so most people choose not to do that. That's your interval recording. So if you want to shoot time lapse, and then there's time code. Whole bunch of settings in here. I'm afraid I need to do some more research to teach you guys that. Audio settings. Here's our inputs, left and right, internal right now. Could change that to input 1 or input 2. And there's our dB for our headroom. There is a limiter and there's a low cut. But it looks to me like this is relying entirely on these pot knobs for your gain control, which is interesting. So, oh, that's why. Here's our inputs. So you can change your gain on here. You can also choose, oh, okay, and it has line and mic separately here. So, audio input. You can choose to do stereo. I'm betting there's a mono. Yeah, so you can set that up as however you need to. You can also give it a delay if you needed to, and the volume. There is a record sound beep. I will not turn that on because that will drive me crazy. And there is an alarm for if the battery is about to die. Again, that might ruin a take though, so I wouldn't turn that on. Output settings, this is where we would change our strength, or like what resolution we're shooting or sending out. And if we want to send out all these options, like our markers, you can change that independently for SDI as well. And then you can choose to put your marker on, indicator. There is focus assist as well, just like with the FS7, it's peaking. And that's exposure assist, I believe. Color bars again. And then we have file, which is where you can set up a scene and save it. So that can be all your settings saved to one spot. So you can just turn the camera on and run. You can also set it up there, and you can choose which SD card to save it to. And then there's network settings. This is if you were connected to Cat5 and if you're doing broadcast. So I won't explain that because we're not going to do that here. But that's what it's for. That's it for the menus. Anybody have any questions about this camera? Like I said, you can shoot. Can you shoot 120 in 4K? I don't think you can.
On that one,
I think it's 60, just like the other one. Okay. Does the sheet I have there say 120?
This is just the FS7.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Let me pull the other one out so you guys can see that. Apologies. I'll reference it right here real quick and then I'll let you guys look at it. 60 at 5.7K, 60 at 4K. So if you want 120, you're down to full HD.
oh,
But you can shoot 240 on this camera, which is quite a bit faster than 180. Yeah. Anybody have any questions? You want to look at it? Cool. Okay, A7S2, this guy in the industry has been considered a low light beast. So if you need a shot in the dark, this is an option. That's honestly what this camera is meant to do. In every other way, it is not anywhere close to any of the other cameras that I just showed you. This can, at best, shoot 8-bit 422. I believe in most 4K modes, it shoots 8-bit 420, which means you're subsampling another channel from the green channel, most likely. And you'll notice that the inputs on this are going to be much less professional than the other cameras. That's this one. You have a mic input, you have a headphone input, you have an HDMI input, but they're all pretty small and pretty crappy. Wouldn't rely on them. If you're going to go out to this, I would go out to a Ninja and attach it straight onto the hot shoe. However, we do have cages for these guys that you can put on and a matte box. So you can build this up if you needed to. What I like to tell people is if you need a second camera angle, this is the camera you should check out if you're using an FS7 or an FS5, because it can match pretty well in S-Log, S-Log3, S-Log2, and it's a full frame sensor, which means you're actually getting farther field of view than you can with any of our other cameras. A7R also has a full frame view and can shoot 4K. And like I said, you can crank this ISO all the way up to 40,096 hundred, and no, that's 409,000. Yeah. So we could turn all the lights off in here and you could still expose pretty decently. But I'm probably going to still be at a 1.5. So I'm going to bring it back down. Let me see. It does have a flip out screen, but it only goes up and down. And as far as codecs go, this shoots A7sii. It's the best codec. Is that the first one I have listed on that sheet, or did you give it to him? I believe that's the best codec you're gonna get. 'Cause I think that's 100 megabytes a second.
Yeah.
Okay, and then 50 for the other option. What's the other option? I forget.
ACV.
ABC HD?
Yeah.
Okay. So we already talked about ABC HD, but I'll cover it again. It's 28 megabytes a second or 50. You're probably shooting in 8-bit. This camera, you're always shooting in 8-bit, but it's going to be an even less sample rate, and it's a lower bit rate. So it's not something that you're going to be able to color grade very easily, or try to get your exposure right on set so that you don't have to mess with it too much in post. This does shoot S-Log3. My experience with S-Log3 on this camera is not good. I would actually shoot S-Log2 on this more than S-Log3. It seems to be more robust. This camera really wasn't meant for S-Log3, but they put it in there if you wanted to. So again, you're gonna at least need 2 stops of light, which luckily you can do with ISO on this camera. It can shoot photos if you wanted it to, but it's only a 12 megapixel sensor, so it's not gonna be great photos. I won't dive into the menu too much because there's a whole lot of pages here, but, and it can also shoot MP4. Did I list that on there? Okay. Another one, don't use it. This camera is actually best when it's shooting XAVC SHD mode, not 4K. If I remember correctly, it can shoot 422 in HD, and I seem to remember you lose something when you shoot 4K, but it's an option. You can also crop in, because this is a full frame camera, you can crop into Super 35 mode. Our 16 millimeter lenses don't cover full frame sensors, so you do have to crop in if you're going to use it with this camera. I think you ran into that while we were in the cage, where we had a vignetting effect going on.
That would be.
Okay, well, it was happening. It also runs on tiny batteries. So you get 3 of them in the kit, and I would charge them as much as you can. Let's see. What else should I cover? It is a mirrorless camera versus the T3i and the 7D. Those are mirrored cameras, older versions. E-mount, so I could take the same lenses. Can you think of anything I haven't covered that I should cover without diving into the menus? White balance should be customizable to color temperature, but I believe
It's in the menus.
yes. But I think it
You
also,
can change the, like, exact. You can do that.
now, does it have the normal presets of an
It does have
DSLR?
presets. It does
Okay,
have
so
presets.
it's got the fancy,
But you can change, so it has presets, you can't manually like go in and like have a hotbar where you change it. You have to like set a preset for the temperature that you want.
in other words, you have to dive into the menu every time you do it.
Yes, you have to go into the menu system.
Okay, so
Did you tell them that, I don't think we have any lenses that autofocus for this camera in the cage?
technically, I won't tell you to do it, but you can put the FS7 kit lens on this.
Oh,
But you're gonna need to use some lens support and attach the lens to the plate. Don't attach the camera.
Yeah.
That's an important thing to note with mirrorless or DSLRs. 70 to 200, or the zoom lens that we have, which I think is 18 to 135. If it's heavier than the body, please do not put the plate on the camera. Put it on the lens support. And if you need it for the FS7, let me know, because I have those lens supports if you're planning on doing that.
so you would have to check out the A7 too, and the FS7. So.
Yes, you'd have to check out 2 cameras. So if that's a need, you can, but most people would shoot that on the FS7.
Yeah. Why would I?
Don't bother with it. White balance, where is white balance? Did you mention that? Do you remember where white balance is, Emily?
Right now?
There's ISO. There it is. So,
You have to scrolling like so.
oh boy.
Don't do that. Okay.
That's auto white balance.
So don't click on it. Here.
Set?
No.
No, that's custom. Hold on. Oh, here we
So,
go.
Don't,
So you can
don't
use the
click on it,
custom settings.
but like hit the menu to the right.
Yes, and then you can change it.
Yeah, you can change.
Oh, wait.
I think it's one of these.
Is it the scroll wheel?
It's some sort of scroll. Or actually
Somebody's
click.
actually changed that. Hold
Here,
on.
wait, I know how to do it.
There we go. So, which one is it? You have your phone open. Okay. Here. We probably can just do.
I don't know why it's going into that color space, because it shouldn't go into that color space when you're doing it.
Re-aim the camera.
I can. It's like out of focus. Is there? Oh,
Well, it's also
Oh.
pretty darn bright right now, so
does it autofocus? I guess it would. That would make sense.
yes.
Oh, frick. It's so sensitive. It's so zoomed in. Okay, it's
Where's the
focused.
monitor
No, it's
brightness?
on there. It's got it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Kind of blurry, but
Yeah,
okay.
that's as good as you're gonna get.
Let's go back to what you were doing. White balance.
So you can also access it. You can access most of your camera features by going into and clicking FN.
Function.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's right above this little scroll wheel. It's really blurry now. Let's see. So when you go into that, you can change your ISO. Struggling. How do you fix the focus on that? Okay, it's thinking.
It's because this is a bright monitor, so if you can help me find the monitor brightness settings.
No, oh, that'll take too much time. Oh, okay. Monitor.
Oh, no, that's switching between the two. Sorry, guys.
Okay, what we can do though, instead of making it bright, we can put the lens cap on it. So that it's not so bright.
Right, but it's the inherent brightness of the
I
display.
know, when we put this, because when,
Does it lose
I can
focus
see-
when it's seeing the
yeah, when
shot?
it's black, it can see, when it's dark, it can see the screen, but when
Oh,
it's.
found it. Hold on. There we go. That's better. Ish.
So if we go here, you can kind of see it. I mean, I'll just tell them what it is, like they can kind of see where I'm at. So yeah, right here, the wheel function is right above this wheel right here. There you go. Yeah. Right here. If you go into white balance, there's all of these like custom features here. Oh, it's kind of going.
If there's a minimum focus distance.
Basically, you can't change the color temperature until you go into, it says ctemp/filter, and it's like a little K symbol. But you can't, if you click on it, then it'll like automatically go to whatever it's set to. But if you want to adjust it to like a specific temperature, you hit the right button, and it'll go to that so that you can kind of go and choose a specific temperature. And that's the biggest thing for this one. They do have some presets in here, like for daylight, shade, cloudy, but it's not that good. And then if you want, you can do some custom ones. but I would say the biggest thing is just being able to change the temperature overall. And once you have it to a specific temperature, then you hit enter and it'll have the temperature on there.
Can you save that as like a setting?
You can. Yeah.
You can save 3
Like,
custom
save it and then not
kelvins.
every-
No, so actually, yeah, you can save like a specific like tint. That was the color wheel.
Yes.
But I've
So
never
you have to
used that
manually
before.
change the Kelvin
Yeah.
temperature
You do.
every time?
Yeah, each time you want to change color temperature, it'll just be the last one that you chose. And that's like the preset. But you'll have to go in and change it. Okay.
You can also use the presets like in any DSLR where you can pick daylight, fluorescent, but it's kind of chosen for you. This is the custom way to fix that problem. So if this is your A cam, you're gonna have some issues. If it's your B cam, you just set it up for that shot and you're good. So
Okay. And then this scroll wheel up here at the top, I don't know if you went through it.
I didn't, but
Okay.
that's your your shutter speed,
This is
correct?
shutter speed. So yeah, if you just roll it, it'll go along. And then this one, I wouldn't choose any of this. This wheel right here will set your like exposure settings for you. And it'll automatically do that. So
That's more of a photography thing.
yeah, that's a photography thing. If you're, doing video, then you should know how to manually set your settings. And then I would keep this always in the manual setting. This camera does not do in-camera time lapses. There is an app that you can download to do time lapses, but I haven't done it yet, and it costs money to put onto the camera. But if that's something that you want to do on this camera, then maybe we can like talk about it with the kid to upload that software on there. But for now, it does not do time lapses. Let's see what else in here. And then there's this specific things. If you go to the left on the little scroll dial here, you can shoot. This is if you're doing like pictures, like on Location Scouts. You can do single shooting, continuous shooting, and then like you can set a timer. That's pretty much it for like photography mode. And then let's see. I think that's the biggest thing. The thumbnail button is this bottom left button under the wheel. And then you can also like trash it if you want. Let's see. And then, yeah, this lens doesn't do autofocus, but we went over that. But I think that's the biggest thing for this one. There is a way to change your color settings in the menu. Did you go over that yet?
No.
Okay.
When you talk about color settings, what are you referring to?
So like, let me see what it is, where it's at. I don't know what it's talking about. So if you want to make your like your video flat, there's a way to do that.
Oh,
Yeah.
you mean to change your gamma.
Like
Yes.
the gamma. There is a way to do that.
So that was what I was talking about earlier. You have your LUT and your gamma setting. So you're going to match your LUT and your gamma up with what you want. So you're going to shoot in Cine 3.slog, or you're going to shoot in a gamma that's set for slog, or there's a couple other ones that are preset like Cine 1. I don't remember exactly what they are on this camera, but Sony's
It
pretty.
has S-Log, I think.
Yes,
S-Log.
it has slog 2 and slog 3.
Yeah.
Where do you go for that?
I'm trying to find it. I found
It should be back in the camera over there.
It wasn't in the camera.
Try the settings right next to it, the toolbar.
It's called something different.
It might be picture profile.
I think it's
So go to the camera and then go to all the way. Keep going. It's at the bottom there.
Oh,
Yeah.
it is
So
picture
picture
profile.
profile. You guys familiar
Yeah.
with picture profiles at all? They're
So this
basically
one-
custom lookbooks that Sony uses. So you can set a picture profile to slog 2 or
Okay.
slog 3, and then you can change your shift of either green or magenta, orange or teal.
Yeah. Okay, so it is in the camera icon in the menu system. Go to picture profile, and then if you want to, they have like custom LUTs on here.
Yes, I have a whole bunch.
Yeah, but you can change some of the settings in it. So like go to whatever one you want to use, and then hit the right button to go further into the menu, and you can change like the gamma on it. And then, let's see, menu is back. In the color mode, the saturation, let's see. You can change black level and black gamma if you want to.
Correct.
But I mean, they have some pretty decent presets, but I would look at them first before you shoot with it.
Yeah. You have any questions on the A7S2?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
I could cover the Black Magic today, but I think we probably should cut it off here and I'll just introduce you to it because
Yeah.
I'm a Black Magic shooter, so I know a few things about how to make it work.
Okay. I'll just, I guess that's it then.
Yeah, we're gonna call it good for this.